Well, welcome to the March 27th New Tracks Meetup. Thanks so much for coming. Hope you come back often and tell your friends about us. I have two quick announcements. One, if you're new to the show, I hope you'll register at our newtracksmodeling.com website. That's newtracksmodeling.com. And when you do, you will receive an email that you will have to confirm in order to be able to be fully registered. But I encourage you to do that, and then you'll get notices about all of our future shows. Our next My Build is coming up March the 31st. That's next Wednesday. And Chris Kuntz is holding a raffle for the people that enter the My Build that were part of the Build Along project with Greg Cassidy. So if all of you decide to come, you'll have an equal chance at winning Chris's prize. And I hope you'll do that and show us your modeling from the Build Along with Greg. With that said, I want to go immediately to our featured modeler, Patrick Grace. Patrick's in a slightly different time zone than most of us. He lives in Scotland, and I'm trying to make sure that I can accommodate him and at the same time get the benefit of his modeling expertise before midnight tonight. So Patrick, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. I know this is late for you, but I really do appreciate you joining us this evening, and I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Right. I suppose the first thing I ought to say is this is a typical British house. This is a house I used to own. It is a total of 32 square meters or 344 square feet of living space spread over 2 floors. So nowhere to put your model railroad. So I'll start with that. This is a fundamental factor that affects how the British hobby works. Some people have houses where you can put a layout in the loft. Basements are pretty well as rare as hen's teeth. They're not very common. So you either put a layout in a garage if you've got one and aren't using it for something else, or you have to build a garden building, or you build something sectional, which you could take to model railway exhibitions, or you build it via a model railway club. Having said that, you do get, and I'm going to show you, this is actually a layout in Aberdeenshire. This is an O-gauge layout, which no longer exists, that was built by a gentleman in a series of cow barns, and buyers and represented the railway from Manchester across to Leeds in the 1930s. What we also have here in the UK, and we'll go on to American modelling in the UK in a little bit, but I want to go through how the hobby works. If you've got questions, either put them in the chat or they'll get asked back, or stop me and ask me. I'm happy to do that as well. Anyway, so we'll go on from here. Is we get a scale issue. These 3 coaches here, sitting here on my little Canadian module, are all HO scale coaches. The first one is a British coach, the second one's Swedish, i.e. European, and the third one is a Rapido Canadian model. All, as you can see, the British coach is a lot smaller. This has caused a historic problem with all British modelling, and all British models are actually narrow gauge because you couldn't get the electric motors in to this size to the British bodies. So what you get is the British HO scale is actually called 00 and is 176 instead of 187. So everything's a bit taller, but it runs on exactly the same tracks. It's all a little bit narrow. The result of this has been that there have been a number of specialist attempts to improve the scale gauge ratio. The main ones being that you will come across, if you would come here, would be EM, which is 18mm track gauge, and P4, which is 18.83, so it's very accurate. It's effectively proto 87, but for British track gauges. You'll also see quite a lot of narrow gauge layouts here. That's very common. There's a couple of large societies pushing that. And in N gauge, you will get 2mm fine scale, which is the equivalent of proto 87, but for N gauge. What you then, so the result is you end up with clubs and societies. This is actually an American modular group called the Thames Siders. And they are one of the two types of club you get. This sort of club basically meet in a church hall or a rented facility, and they have to put the layout up when they meet and then take it down and put it away again. In this case, the Thames Siders meet one Saturday a month, all day. So they took it out of storage, put it up, work on it, play with it, whatever, and then have to pack it up at the end of the day and put it away again. The other sort of club you get is this. This is actually the Colchester Model Railway Club's facility, which is in an old barn, where you've got rented permanent accommodation. The layout you're looking at here is a large N gauge called Hills Country in Mark 2A form. It's changed over the 20-odd years of its life several times. There are a number of clubs that own their own premises, the most famous being the Model Railway Club, which was founded in 1910, and the other one being the Worley Model Railway Club, who run the big exhibition every November in Birmingham, and they've obviously made enough money over the years to buy themselves an industrial unit. The Model Railway Club have premises in central London, just round from King's Cross Station. Going on for that, you also have a lot of specialist societies in the UK. So we have obviously a lot of historical societies which may have a modelling element. We have a number of scale-specific societies, the most well-known being the N-Gauge Society, the Gauge O Guild, and the 009 Society. There are plenty of others. There are also then another batch of specialist societies, which include the Swiss Society, the German Society, that actually, because of the way the hobby works in the UK and Europe, the NMRA has become very much a specialist American society within the continent of Europe. It just works slightly differently. The other thing I ought to mention is that is a quick history of British Railways before I go on to show you some photos from exhibitions. The British Railways started in 1825 when they built the Stockton and Darlington Railway. Before that, there were a number of steam-hauled colliery railways starting from 1804. And up to 1923, they ended up with about 365 of them, not all of which actually had motive power. There were a number that were operated by a larger company. In 1923, the government, after the First World War, decided we need to sort this out. And what they did was they created the grouping, which created 4 companies: the Southern Railway, which is basically south of London; the Great Western Railway, which is essentially the railway as built by Brunel, with a few additions in Wales; the London, Midland and Scottish, which went up the west coast of the UK to Glasgow, and then on up into further north in Scotland; and you have the London and North Eastern, which ran up the east coast into Edinburgh. In 1948, after the Second World War, the railways were then nationalised as British Rail. British Rail at that point looked at its locomotive stock and started building more steam engines. Essentially, steam engines ran on coal that we dug out the ground, therefore it was cheaper than trying to import oil, which the government wasn't very keen on at the time. The railways, by the mid-50s, started dieselising. The original plan had been to take till about 1970, 75, I believe. Steam was eliminated in 1968. So what you get is early British Railways steam and diesel, which is basically 55 through to the late 60s. British Rail then had an image change and painted all the locos became blue and all the coaching was blue and grey. So that continued on until the 1980s, where you got full sectorisation. So, for example, all the commuter network around London was rebranded as Network South East. So they painted in a slightly different paint scheme, but it was still British Rail. During the early 1990s, the John Major government split British Rail, the railway companies, from the track and privatised the whole lot. By the end of the 1990s, the track had ended up back in government control because the track company, frankly, made a bit of a mess of it and safety was beginning to become a problem. What seems to be the latest situation is that while there have been franchises for operating lines, there seems to be an inclination by both Westminster and Edinburgh and Cardiff, because transport is now a devolved power, to actually bring the trains into state control again, because they're finding that it's just become too expensive paying people. It's actually cheaper to do it. Where we're going after COVID, no idea. So, exhibitions. We'll start with this layout. This is actually a G-scale layout called Third Street Yard, which was at a specialist American show called Arden Rail, run by Kathy Millett, among other people, for about 3 or 4 years in the early 1990s. It, for various reasons, ceased to happen at that point. I put this in really to show that picking up layouts and taking them to exhibitions causes problems. Here we've got at least 2 people who are who've worked for 3 people who've worked for Marconi, so fairly high-powered electrical engineers, trying to work out why Thameside's American layout has decided to break down at Spalding. We'd taken it up in a van, put it together, and it decided it didn't want to play. It's a normal thing, I think, of a dry joint. This is the Colchester exhibition back in the late 90s, and it gives you an idea of a typical exhibition. You've got layouts back here on the stage, the Railway Specialist Historical Society here, the Engage Society, so a Scale Society here, various layouts scattered around, and you can see over here a trader called Kent Panel Controls who provided DC power packs and controllers. And we'll show just a few layouts. This is an overview. This is a layout called Glebe Street at Aberdeen in 2018. It's basically a sort of, it's a typical Scottish exhibition. It's actually in a hotel, and they vary in size. The Inverness venue is a bit pokey. Aberdeen's is actually a fairly decent size, and you can get a fairly large number of layouts of reasonable size in there. This being a typical Aberdeen layout, this is a modern image Aberdeen layout called Craig and Torrey, with a steam special awaiting having come in with its support coach here and awaiting departure, with then some modern traffic here and a fully working container yard, which is based on one south end of Aberdeen. The reason that Scottish clubs tend to build big layouts is there's a big annual exhibition in Glasgow, and the clubs that are members of the Scottish Bottle Railway Association get paid by visible area for the public. So there's a bit of a financial incentive. I don't know if you've heard of a program called the Great Model Railway Challenge. This was one of 2 layouts that Aberdeen built for the first series. This layout's called Clucas Bay, and won them their heat. It is DCC and controlled remotely using something called Touch Cab on iPhones. The other layout they built was called City of Tears, which actually won the first series, Unfortunately, I don't have any photos of it, and due to the nature of how that layout was built, it's had to be scrapped because it basically disintegrated. The boards are MDF, and while this one was properly sealed, the other one, for various reasons, wasn't, and accordingly has taken exception to the wet. This is probably one of the most famous layouts currently in the UK. This is a 2mm fine scale layout called Copenhagen Fields, which is based on the main line out of King's Cross in the 1930s, if I remember rightly. And it's actually, I think it was the 1920s. And they have been building this thing for 45 years. It is an exquisite piece of modelling. It's fairly large. And as I said, if it was there then, they've built it. And then we have something slightly stranger. This was built by a gentleman called Mike Sharman to show off his collection. This is 4mm scales. This is 00 gauge. It was to show off his collection of weird and wonderful early locos he scratch built. In fact, I believe pretty well all the stock is scratch built. Possibly not these two here. They may well have been trying Hornby, because they certainly did make a rocket, etc. in the 60s. You got some very strange things like this particular machine, where the cylinders drove a crankshaft, which then in turn drove the wheels. You then get this. This is an N gauge. This is an 009, so it's a 2-foot gauge, 4mm scale layout called the Dam Railway, spelt not as in the structure, but apparently as the curse, because it was apparently a bit of a pain, but a very nice and interesting sort of industrial railway. You get a lot of this sort of layout. These are Welsh narrow gauge layouts. This one's based on the Festiniog. And if I remember rightly, they've actually got a dragon on it somewhere as well, which I suspect is actually out of shot. The other sort of layout you get, this one, Leadsom Street Yard, which is a small 4mm gauge switching layout. And it's essentially designed, the design is called an ingle nook, and essentially you've got a small storage yard off here, and then a couple of spurs which you can then switch things into. It's again a very typical micro layout design, and you get quite a lot of these because you could set them up at home. I'll just put this is an O gauge loco from south of London. This has actually just been announced. They've just announced this is a Southampton dock loco. Dapol have just announced they're going to do this in ready to run in O gauge, which gives you an idea of where O gauge is going in the UK. It'll all be two rail. And this is actually a scale 4, so 18.83 gauge, 4mm to the foot. So layout called Burnt Island. It's based on the railways north of the Firth of Forth in Scotland before they built the famous bridge across the Forth. And at that point, you actually had numerous train ferries running across from Edinburgh to Burnt Island. And if you do ever get anywhere near an exhibition with it on, it is an absolutely fantastic piece of modelling. And then you get, we see the missed one. We have here a little ironing board built by the Hull Club to see what they could do with an ironing board. So you've got a little narrow gauge industrial layout on an ironing board. And this is a 2mm. This is actually an O gauge, 2-foot gauge railway based again on the Festiniog, but it just to show that the narrow gauge, this sort of style appears very much here. This layout is Foxhatch. It's based on the northern part of the UK, on the east coast, somewhere probably somewhere in Yorkshire or Durham, I would say. It's a long time since I took the photo and I can't remember. This is one of the Smith Brothers layouts. This particular one, called Courcelles Part, is a beautiful O-gauge French layout, taken at a semi-specialist show called Eurotrack in Southampton. And then we have a Danish layout, and slightly embarrassingly, I can't remember what the layout's called. It is HO scale DCC. I'm just sort of giving you a sort of selection of the sort of thing you can find in terms of the European layouts. This is a layout this is Irish, called Dundalk Works, and is essentially British 00, so 16.5mm track, 4mm scale, built by one of the Irish clubs, and it's fairly impressive. And we have here the late former president of the Colchester Club with his N-gauge model of Colchester Loco Depot. The main line is literally here. And somehow they managed to shoehorn into not a very large area, something like 70 locomotives in steam days. This is a Colchester open day. A lot of clubs will do this sort of thing where it's not a formal exhibition, therefore you're in a situation where the club is not necessarily won't necessarily charge entry. I mean, in this case, the Colchester Club's method is there's a second-hand table for members' sales, so they take a percentage of that, and there's a donations bucket. We actually have the layout in the background here is a layout called Buda, based on Buda, Illinois. We then have a Club 00 layout under construction, and a members' private 00 layout here at the front. And this particular layout is called East Lynn, which I put in basically to show you this thing, which you may recognise from the Thomas books as Toby. Now produced as a very, very nice model by Rapido for Model Rail magazine. The Reverend Audrey would have seen these things going past his house every day of the week, because he actually lived just on the line on the Wisbeach and Upwell tramway. And the reason for all the skirting is not to frighten the horses. And this ship here is called this is a Thames Barge, and it's a very typical East Anglian sail going coaster. Basically, they could bottom them out in the mud anywhere. And here is another view of the rest of the layout, showing you the station area with lines coming in from staging yards, both back and front. And I had to put in a Western region layout. This is it. It's called East Street Wharf, and is a Great Western. It's the Great Western Railway in British Rail days. The loco here is a typical Great Western pannier. I didn't actually find any photos of any Great Western layouts. You get some slightly strange layouts. This is actually based on a layout that was built for the festival, a railway that was built for the Festival of Britain in 1951, called the Far Twittering and Oyster Perch. And it was done by a famous cartoonist, and somebody's made a model of it. And this is another OO. This is actually an OO gauge fine scale layout called Bresley Beat, and is based on part of the Great Eastern Northern Main Line out of London, It's basically, it was under construction at this point, but the layout basically is a place where you will go and see lots of sort of, you'll see the Flying Scotsman and the Mallard. It's very much a layout for train watching, but train watching fairly famous Pacific by British in the UK, famous Pacifics. We then have Hungerford, which is again another Western region layout, and Livorno. This is an Italian layout. You will find non-British layouts at exhibitions. They vary. It varies what you find depending on what you can find. This is a military layout called Lulworth Camp. There are a number of other of those. The last few years there's been a bit of a trend, partially helped by Barkman and Pico and Helian, all producing locomotives to build 1914-18 trench railways. There seems to be quite a lot of First World War railways suddenly appearing because the stock's available. This is a Greek layout called Megalo. I'm not going to try pronouncing the other half. It's different. It's the only one I know of on the circuit. There are quite a lot of Swiss layouts and an awful lot of Swiss narrow gauge. This one called Server is actually, I think, O gauge narrow gauge. And we have a Finnish N gauge layout, again the only one in the UK. And Norwegian, there's several Norwegian layouts about, including a rather narrow gauge one, which I've not seen. This is south of London in the 1980s. The layout is actually called Vauxhall Road, and it's basically a multiple unit servicing depot. You see where the mouse is. This is all operated on third rail. So we got third rail trains because that's how the southern region operates, and the rail being serviced as well. That's what these two coaches are. And the final sort of layout from an exhibition layout. This is called Wild Pig in German, and is a little German narrow gauge layout. And then we'll go on to typical trade. This is Mr. John Duckfield, who's this gentleman here. This is the model shop from Chelmsford in Essex, as at Colchester exhibition some years ago. And then from a larger show at Alexandra Palace, we have a specialist American trader who has now retired called LSWR Models. You also get things like this, which is a display of models. This is actually Colchester Open Day. So one of the members is into sort of American G-scale, American-ish G-scale. A couple of my resin kits, and then somebody scratch built a station from one of the minor lines in the Colchester area. And you get the societies. This is the British region stand at the big exhibition in Birmingham some years ago. It has been up, but the stand has changed slightly in the way we do it, but it's essentially much the same. And Gaucho Guild at Colchester. And we have the demonstrator. We have demonstrators. In this case, Mr. Mundy doing a demonstration on soldering. There's normally chairs. You can sit down and have a chat with the demonstrators and talk as to how they do it and whatever. Now I'm going to go on and look at some American modelling in the UK. This layout here is actually the oldest layout I'm going to show. It was originally built by this gentleman here, and some other gentlemen back in the 1970s. It then up some years at the now closed theme park in Derbyshire, then spent time in a cold, wet Welsh barn before eventually coming to the Colchester Club. The layout's called Avery. It's based on it was originally a very good model of Avery, Idaho. By the time we got it, it needed quite a lot of refurbishment. And because the stock available was mainly Pennsylvania Railroad, we moved it east and rebuilt all the scenery, rewired it totally because a lot of the wiring had gone, and all the connector cables had gone, so we had to rewire it. So it was all rewired. It has since been passed on to a gentleman in the Derby area, and is used as his home layout in a garage. So here the layout being 20 foot by 12 foot. We pushed the fiddle yards back a little bit, so it was originally 20 by 10, but it made the curves better. Got a view there, and then this is actually taken at a British Region convention. So the gentleman here behind the layout is actually testing out his brand new rear ground Zephyr on the layout, and the yard with the buildings, the original buildings. We did some minor repairs, but that was it. So very much as it would have been to convert it to the Milwaukee Road, you'd probably be just string the wires really and change the stock. Another view from the other direction, another view, couple of views of the layout. This layout was built by Gent. It's an O gauge portable layout built by Harry Dodd, and was at Aberdeen a couple of years ago, called Second Hand Yard. Unfortunately, I don't actually have a closer photo. And then this gentleman here is Peter Borshard's. This is at a NMRA British Region meet in the middle of England at a place called Benson, and with his original Rochelle intermodal layout in N-gauge. And this is the layout Buda. I was still under construction when I took these photos. It was built by a friend of mine called Paul Evans, who is another former British Region treasurer, as it happens. And another view of Buda at exhibition again. Basically, the station building and the creamery hadn't been completed. Most of the rest of the layout had, and we just ran out. It just ran out of time before it was due out to somebody. A 930 layout called Camp 93. Very nice layout. Again, another view. Can't remember quite who built it. This is a layout that was built by a group of gentlemen up in the Newcastle area called Sweet Home Chicago. A well-known layout, beautiful, sort of heavy industrial Chicagoland steam era layout. And Z gauge. This layout was by former owner of the Northampton Bottle Railway shop, and based on the California coastline. And another, this is called Dixie Mining, and again at General Public Exhibition, I think. This layout was built. This cupola yard was built by Alan Capp, I believe, if I remember correctly. This was taken in Southampton when he was visiting there, and this layout has been built by the East Uke Model Railway Club from Fife. It's called Morven Yard and is based on Conrail. And with the gentleman here is Steve Scott, who's a former region secretary, operating the Welsh Dragons, which is an NMRA subdivision in Wales there. I suppose I can call it Wild West layout. It's very much that. Yeah, era and location. Then we're going on. This is the Thamesiders in 2017 at Alexandra Palace. The Thamesiders layout is actually modular, and it has been developed so you can actually hang Fremo modules onto it via a shaped junction. And we actually had, this is the current Atlantic director, a gentleman called Mike Arnold, in the middle. We had the fiddle. For this exhibition, we had a figure of 8 with then fiddly with then a long layout, set of Fremo modules called the coal branch, plus my Canadian module, plus another staging yard on the end of the Canadian module. And it was quite a large layout. And this lovely lady came round and looked down and suddenly said, "Oh, that's the same layout." So, yeah, very much fairly modern image. Here we are running through a section called Peach Meadows. The layouts tend to get named after people. This is another set of modules. I forget which one this one is actually. And then here, as you can see, this is actually one of the junctions into the staging yard. And there's a single way in. There's a track that comes out here that can act as a connector to a Fremo module. And you can also connect that way to a Fremo module. And this was in 2017 when the whole thing ended up being 75 feet long and about 30 feet wide. And in England, they actually pay out of expenses if you take your layout to an exhibition. This one, by the time we'd hired 2 vans and a number of the cars had been used, it ended up costing the exhibition organisers something like £1,200, which is quite a lot of money. So what you've got is the actual Thames-siders roundy and fiddly yard here. It then comes up through another yard, through one of the first British Fremo modules built in the UK, which is called Alpha. Then onto this line, which is an Appalachian line called the Coal Branch. Coming this way, we go, there's a module called Jonesville. Then my Canadian module, Warner. There was then a corner and another module or two. So it all terminated in a little staging yard at the far end. And this is it from the other direction. So you can see this is during the build period. So we could actually have vehicles in the hall. Obviously that wouldn't be there while it was open. And this is a photograph of it when the yard was open, when the show was open. As you can see, there's a fair number of public around. It's not the biggest show in the UK. That's the one in Birmingham, where they will get around 15,000 through, possibly a bit more, possibly a bit less. Great Model Railway Challenge certainly put the numbers up. The whole thing is operated by JMRI. The only issue we did find was that the Wi-Fi didn't work because there were too many other people using the bandwidth or a very similar bandwidth. Again, more construction. You can see what we call the Delta boards here, with the sweep round into the circuit and the ability to go back round straight out. And Mike Meadows hadn't finished putting containers on his module at the time. We can also run the thing by changing the buildings. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. You can check by changing the buildings and taking out certain modules and putting in other ones. It can be run as a transition era layout. And this was a photograph of it at Spalding where we were asked to do that. This is the Coal Branch. This is actually taken when it was being exhibited as it on its own at Bury St Edmunds. Built by a guy called Chris Coombs. It's very clever. There are a series of cheese wedge shaped sections. You can actually curve that out into a sort of a question mark, make it a bendy layout. You can do all kinds of clever things with the layout. And here again, you can see a little train trundling along. And here's Chris, and he built a pair of fiddle yards so it could actually be used more sensibly on its own. And there's his coal tipple. The layout over here, called Wensleydale, is all to do with mice. And there's anti-cat patrols, and if there's a bad joke about cheese and mice, it's on there. It's quite good fun. And here's Chris Coombs's coal tipples taken at Alexandra Palace in 2007, I think, and one of his kit bash locos. One of the developments we have had in the UK in the last 10 years is the growth of Fremo. This is one of the Primo meets. This is actually an early Primo South. There've been a number of others, and attendance has gone up. There are 3 or 4 major meets a year now, and there is intention when we run the 2022 convention in Crewe, we should have the space for a decent sized Fremo layout and a decent sized N-gauge modular layout as well. This is Jonesville here. Down here is a layout called Fort Myers, which I know has been in the model railroader. And then there's a sort of a spur coming up here. And another view, you've got a bit, there's a staging yard. This ran up through to some industries. The other train line went through Fort Myers up to this junction, at which point you could either go to Jonesville and the staging yard or go through here, which took you through my module and on. This is actually my Canadian module, as it was a month ago. I have since put static grass all over the thing, so it looks slightly different. And another view, as I said, this is what it looked like a month ago. It has changed. I'm in the process of upgrading it because it's theoretically due to go to Glasgow next year. If Glasgow runs, and if they, because it was meant to go this year. Sorry, it was meant to, yes, it was meant to go this year. Obviously that got cancelled. Whether it'll go next year, we haven't heard yet. We've got a few photos. And then I'll go on to the large N-gauge. This is a Colchester Club layout that I now own called Hills Country. Here's a layout under construction. The whole thing in its final form is 24'6" long, 5 foot wide, of which 4'6" is scenic, and it's anything up to 3 foot tall, which makes getting it in and out of places sometimes a little bit interesting. We did on one occasion. I'm not sure how we got it in, but the only way to get it out was to take the door and the door jamb off, which is interesting. But then have to put it all back again. But this is the layout under construction. And again, here in the club room under construction, it was originally built, this is the original form, as a DC layout with a helix behind here, which then in turn enabled you would then run along the back here, round the reversing loop and back to the helix. And there was a loco shed and a fairly tight interior curve here, which there were continuous issues with it. Here's the actual loco shed with the curves. This shows it after we rebuilt it. We changed it to a straight layout, buried the helix in this big mountain, and the whole thing became much simpler because it's essentially now 6 boards. You could turn up at an event and basically within an hour of arriving, have the whole thing up and have the track cleaning train running around with its heart's content. And this is Paul's the Zephyr, just running along the front of the layout. And these photos here, this was taken after we did some further improvements to it at the NMRA convention in 2015. As you can see, it's one of the reasons we built this layout, and is that at the time we started designing it, standard British N-gauge American layout was a 4 foot board covered in track, and it just didn't look right. This is one of the Sunborough photos that I took for Continental Modeler magazine when there was an article last year about the overall size of the thing. Are you still hearing me? I've got a...
Yes, I can
Yes,
hear
we
you.
still hear you. Your signal is a little low.
Sorry, I just got to... Yeah, we've signal earlier this evening, so that's why I was just checking. But as you can see, it's a large layout. At this point, the trees had all been, which had been far too big, have all been heavily reworked and made a lot less luminous green. I ended up spending a winter basically giving trees haircuts. And again, another view of the layout as it is at the moment. And the back of the layout, just for the sake of it, the two panels were actually originally built for cab control. There were actually 6 controllers down here. So DCCing it was a serious improvement. And it moves by putting a pair of boards on end plates on two boards, and then you put each pair of boards onto one of these trolleys. And that's how we move it. And we just basically use a van with a tail lift, and off it goes. And there's the hill with the helix buried inside it. And as you can see, what happens is the railway, one of the lines runs up the back here, round, over this, round the back, down the helix, and back into the town. The only problem is we designed the incline going that way round a Minitrix class 27, which has a cast metal body, and it pulls more than some of the more modern Cato and Atlas locos do. So we do get an issue with how long a train we can run up the highland. But there it is, the train coming down. This bridge was built by a gentleman called Martin Chiverton, and is basically select of German kit bashed. That's using, I think, Pico bridge sides, the road bridge. The actual railway bridges, there's a couple of these girder bridges were scratch built by Paul Evans out of plasticard. And again, another view, it is in my big garage at home here. And another one. I also, for various reasons, do Swedish Railways. So this is the older of my 2 Swedish layouts. This layout's called Stromstad. It's based on a rail station. This is a Hellion kit painted to very much look like the rail station. It was built late 90s, and it represents Stromstad is a tourist town. It's a fairly upmarket tourist town, and it represents it in the summer season. The kiosk here being would be an ice cream vendor, and then this is actually a vintage kiosk, which would be selling, which would be, for my purposes, it acts as a newspaper and tourist information office. The catenary reports are interesting. The actual masts are made out of white metal, and the things bend very easily. The crossbands were made actually welded steel. And they both come from a Swedish supplier. There is another Swedish catenary system available, but availability of parts can be interesting. And also, you then have to they're basically scratch aid kits, and you get a load of etched frets that you then need to bend up, solder up, and assemble. This is a view going across the station throat with a number of, these are all wooden buildings by a now defunct company called Euromod, which at one point were owned by Humbrol. The car, this brown car was made by a Danish company specialist. This is actually, the white car is actually a Lilliput product. And the layout at an exhibition, just to give you an idea of of the layout, it's essentially, this spurs the goods loop. This is the main line. You have a couple of spurs here, one of which is used for running around goods trains. The other one is actually used to store coaching stock. There being a sleeping car which comes in and has to be left, and a day coach appears, and then obviously at the end of the day the things reverse, and there may or may not be a rail, but other vehicles stored in here. And here's a British staging yard, again with a number of trains. All of this is essentially commercial stock, brilliant, which has been available at some point. Some of it, these coaches are mainly Lima, and they're no longer available, but one of the Norwegian companies do them. This is how the layout should have looked at that show if we'd not forgotten the curtains. This is actually a track. And I managed to forget the control panel, so I ended up driving from Southampton to Colchester and back again, which in about 5 hours, which is pretty quick for the UK. I wasn't necessarily totally doing the speed limit. Again, here, all of this down is tank cars, Brawa. This thing's Lilliput. This is Hobby Trade Danish. This is a Lima product. And you've then got a selection of European plastic kit buildings. The loco shed, which is actually scratch built, and the little switcher in there is a Triang Hornby toy train switcher. They did a toy train set with a Swedish switcher. Nobody has any idea, but they did. So that's what it is. Somebody does a very nice modern model of the thing. And again, here, this vehicle's Roco. This is actually made by a company called NMJ, Norwegian Model Trains. They've done quite a lot. They do quite a lot of Scandinavian stock. This is from the shop in Stockholm who make the thing, make a number of those. Again, here, this is a slightly earlier date actually, but in terms of time-wise, with a typical Swedish rod drive electric hiding in the background, and another one here, which is very much typical of the era. And just so that, because I happen to have the photo, this was at the NEC one year, and the layout was there, and a friend of mine wanted to put his Danish loco on it. The loco is known as Marilyn Monroe because it has a rather curvaceous body. They were a domestic equivalent of the NOHABs, the NOHABs being basically General Motors F 1500 horsepower units that were built to put in a double-ended cab body by NOHAB in Sweden and then sold to the Danish. The two Danish locos were not very successful. And we'll switch to my final layout. This layout is called Small Talk. I originally intended to DCC it. It turned out to be easier not to, so this layout is DC. Stromstad has actually gone to DCC because the more modern stock makes decodering easy. Some of the locos on here are just too small, and trying to get chips in turned out not to be practical. It's based on a branch station called Hildin, which is in southern Sweden, built to serve a large paper and pulp mill. There were a variety of reasons why I ended up doing a proto freelance. Part of it was I was having trouble getting information. This bridge is correctly located, but there isn't actually a river under it. There's a very large outflow pipe for a hydroelectric plant, but I just don't have the information. Track plan here is reasonable, except it really should be disappearing off at 90 degrees to the rest of the layout, because the whole thing's huge. But it's very much, and it's pre-war, private railway Swedish. It's probably one of the more obscure layouts in the UK. So here we have the station. It's set at 9:39. So just before war broke out, the war clouds were very much gathering. So you've got an express train that's come in from the state network. The train is actually a Trix product with a kit built Nesher coach on the rear. It's come in from somewhere on the state network with a steam tank engine on. It's come up here because they've want to go and swim or whatever in the local lake, and they've run an excursion. These two vehicles are kit built. The little narrow gauge hoppers are actually made by Auhagen, and then you have a selection of vehicles and things. That truck is typical. The Swedes do like American road vehicles. And here again, here's that van. I looked at the layout. I didn't notice the spider's web until after I'd taken the photo. There's also a bit of narrow gauge on it. This particular one is HON3, which in Sweden means they're modelling 891mm gauge, 3 Swedish feet. If they go to 12mm gauge, so HOM, they then there was a lot 3'6" British Imperial trackage in Sweden, so that means they'll be modelling that. If they go narrower, so if you go down to 9mm, you're essentially modelling 2-foot gauge. That's the way it works. And you've got a quantity of timber being shuffled around, a typical sort of little flat trolley shuffling timber around with a little grant line switcher. And there's a selection of timber drying, which is very typical of this sort of thing. A freight train, the loco is actually a kit bash of an old Lima British loco, which wasn't powered, and with scratch-built powered tender at the rear. And this particular machine was done on the basis of one of the Swedish magazines, and essentially is a standard State Railways 280 cab sitting on a Fleischmann Black Anna with a Swedish style chimney. The Swedes, this is the Swedish equivalent, I suppose, of a doodlebug in many ways. This is a Hildin Carlson rail bus this is one of the earlier versions, to a bogie version, but they looked, but basically it looked very similar. It was longer, but it had a couple of trucks underneath it. This is a 4-wheeler. They sort of added halts left, right, and centre, mainly operated by what they called a plort stints or steel. Basically, you had a sign. You basically just turn the lever, point the sign in the direction of the train. The driver sees it and slams on the brakes. Quite an interesting thing to do. I have done it. Again, and here I've got this is actually a Juif French model, again Scandinavianized from an article in one of the Swedish papers, just coming through the little scenic break that I have. This is a resin kit of the Pride of the Halmstad Nesja, which were these rail buses which they used for trains 1 and 2. In my fictional layout, they actually instead of arriving and sitting there till the next day, they actually arrive early enough to do a quick tour up here and back. And here's the SJ tank loco again. And another view of the layout. This was actually at Ilford, and it was actually surprisingly busy for Ilford. Right, can I get you to stop sharing here? Okay, that's sort of it. Well, me and the UK modelling scene. Are there any questions?
Well, I know I've learned a lot, Patrick. I can't thank you enough. I've never seen as many different countries' models in any place.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't manage to find a decent photo of the Japanese layouts, the Chinese layout, or the Moroccan or Iraqi layouts that I know exist.
Yeah.
The Iraqi layout is actually an exercise in force perspective. It's very, very clever.
Patrick, I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, Greg Cassidy here. I have a question. There have been so many fine structures that were shown on all of those layouts. Is there a preference in materials used in building those? I imagine a lot of them are kits, but probably some are scratch built.
An awful lot of it, if they're kits and they're in the UK, quite a lot of them will be card kits. There's a number of manufacturers that produce some very nice card kits, Metcalf and Super Quick being the main ones. Some of the Super Quick kits are a wee bit ancient. The Europeans, they have a lot of plastic kits. There's an awful lot of laser cut wood appearing now as well. Hornby and Bachmann do quite a large range, variable availability of pre-painted resin building. So it varies depending on what you can find, and you get people scratch building using styrene, building a basic core out of styrene or wood, and then putting some sort of DAS modeling, some sort of model, and then carving it to make individual stones. So it depends on the modeler, and it depends on the layout. I'll also, there was a question from Andy Kearney about knuckle couplings. I put KDs on for switching by choice. In the UK, you get, generally you will get a hook and loop where you have a loop and then a hook which drops down over the loop. That's a standard, very standard British coupling. In Europe, there is a reversed version, which is sort of the standard traditional Marklin type. They're quite common, but there are also a variety of close coupling systems available. And again, in the UK, there are a variety, varying from people who actually got little lengths of chains and a hook, and you put your length of chain over the hook on the other next wagon, etc. DCC, it depends. At the moment, I use lens, but that's what the local model shop wants to sell.
Hey, I'm getting sick. Watch George Masick. No,
George Masick?
I'm sorry.
Right. But at the moment, certainly what I can see from friends, they seem to be buying digi keys at the moment. Probably because it's got the Wi-Fi built in, it makes it easier, and it's more likely to go through British regulations.
Now, does anyone model like the Burnell gauge, broad gauge?
Yes, I have. Mike Sharman did, and I have come across the layouts doing that, complete with the plank rail, which he used, where they actually had the planks running along the rails within an occasional stretcher to keep things engaged.
Huh.
And there are a number of layouts around. I believe there's a model railway museum called Pendon, and I think they may have some O gauge, some broad gauge there. I know they've basically modelled the Great Western in the 1920s. They may well have got. I think they've got something there.
Listen, Patrick,
Patrick, wait a minute.
Yeah,
Patrick, what about
yeah.
the quarry and the coal mining railroads? I didn't see much of that in the layout you were showing up. Is much of that modeled? I know I've seen a lot of videos of those kind of operations.
Yeah, yes, there is a quantity of that sort of industrial. You get, I mean, the coal mines tended to be served by the mainline railroads, so that obviously makes a difference. But you do get industrial layouts, and you even get people modelling the inclines that were necessary to get to and from them. The most well-known being a layout called Middle Peak, built by a guy called Geraint Hughes, who's currently making an interesting Danish layout, which to proto standards, which is going to be quite impressive, even if the set of plans I got for him turned out to be unbuildable because the logo was just so small, which is a bit embarrassing. Oh, in Scotland, in England, you get expenses. In Scotland, it tends to be done, certainly but for clubs, on a mutual basis. So if Aberdeen will be asked to take a layout to Perth one year, Perth will then bring a layout back to Aberdeen the following year. So it's a slightly different sort of distance. I mean, you know, to get to Glasgow is a fairly long drive from Aberdeen. The roads just aren't that quick, and to get down to somewhere like Dumfries is probably an all-day drive.
Hey Patrick, what track do you guys use over there?
Most of us use Pico. Yeah, it's readily available and it's fairly bomb-proof. If you're building EM or P4 or 2mm fine scale, you tend to have to go to specialist suppliers. And there are a number of CNL fine scale comes to mind, but because I don't build to those scales. I'm not totally sure as to who supplies what, but the specialist societies will often supply it. You can often get it from them as well. With the Swiss narrow gauge layouts, historically they did use tracking imported from Europe, but as Pico's now produced a suitable range, I think a lot of people use Pico.
Does anybody else have any questions for Patrick? Patrick, thanks so much again. I can't thank you enough for doing it. I'm sorry it's so late over there for you, but thanks so very much.
Past 12. Not at all.
Thank you. Listen, next, let me turn to Paul Thompson for his quick tip of the evening. Paul?
Great, thanks, Jim. Let me just get going here. I was transfixed with what was going on.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. No, I found that quite interesting. Now, all I have to do is share my screen, which I think we've got right here. Okay. What I wanted to talk about tonight was I found a quick way of keeping cables organized at the end of my module. And what you see here is the end of a Fremo module. And as you can tell, I've got a harness that hooks into the other stuff. And I'm using that little orange thing. And that's what I wanted to point out tonight. There's a close-up of it and how it keeps everything together. Unfortunately, somebody's actually wrapped wire around it. I didn't put this away, but you don't have to do that because this is kind of adjustable. As you can see, it opens up. It's quite unique. You can put it just about anywhere at the end of your module. And this is what it is. It's called a cable cuff. And what I had to do was drill a hole in the middle of it and put a screw through it. And that is fairly easily done. As you can see, just put a drill right through the bottom at this point. And that's a picture of it open. There's a picture of it closed with the name on it, cable cuff. And this is available at Home Depot. Although I do notice now that they have a Cable Cuff Pro. I haven't actually used it, but the idea would still be similar. What I found is you had to file a little bit on the bottom to make this flat. Don't attempt to glue it on because I have yet to find a glue that will actually stick this thing on. That's why I use the screw. There's another picture of it, and you can see that the opening varies a little bit, and they have various sizes of these things. I think there's 4 different sizes. And there's the idea. You put the screw through this side, and you've got yourself a little cable connector, or anywhere you need to open and close and put wires together at various times. And that basically, guys, is my tip for the night. These can be found at Home Depot. Thanks very much.
Oh, thank you. I really do appreciate it. Clark, do you want to start your bill tonight, or had you rather postpone that?
Well, I guess we can do it. It's a little late. I was trying to get out of here before then, but I understand the sequencing. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, then I'd like to introduce Clark Cooning, and I apologize, MMR. And Clark, I apologize for you. You're exactly right. I should have notified you. I talked about this before I started the show, but I guess you weren't on the thing at that time, and I should have sent you an email. And I do apologize for that. I'm just trying to accommodate everybody best way I think that we can get the shows done. And this is the first time we've had this kind of time frame difference. So I apologize to you. Appreciate you staying around. And so we'll turn to Clark Cooning now for his first session or second session of his build along, doing a downtown deco kit.
All right. I have to move you people. There we go. Okay, so this is part 1 of actually the build. So as we talked about the downtown deco plaster, this is the little first timers bar. This is a little kit that's a great kit for a beginner. and it's owned by Randy Peacock. So if you haven't ordered your kit, you can still order your kit and you know, catch up on the build with the YouTube, or catch up a little later with our by working on your own. So a little bit of planning. You know, when we talk about buildings, we should always think about what we're going to do. Now, we're doing a clinic, so it's not like you're going to pick the building, but generally you would, you know, you would look at different buildings and think about, you know, why you need that building and where you need to put it. So you need to look for a structure, develop a concept for the type of structure required. Like, why do you need that type of structure? You can research the prototype if you want to build something directly off a prototype. Find or locate a kit that suits your needs, and develop an outline for assembly, whether you're scratch building, kit bashing, or building out of a kit. You want to read the directions. Sometimes changing the order of things is easier for you. It may not be, but a lot of times there's a reason for why the instructions are made that way, or tell you to do it that way. So you want to gather all your materials, because there's nothing worse than getting started than not having what you need to continue. So, and then enjoy the process. So, and the other thing that you always want to look at is, of course, your scale, the era, location, and family resemblance. I could do a whole clinic on just family resemblance on, and it's not just related to structures, it's related to everything on that layout: scenery, structures, cars, and locomotives. So in engineering, you know, you want to develop a little engineering plan to build your structure, especially if you're scratch building. In this case, we're following kit plans. You do want to build it in substructures because it makes it a lot easier to handle. In this little kit, there is basically only one substructure. So, yeah, but it does make it a little bit easier when you're building a sort of a multiple structure that you have to all build together. It reduces your stress as the project is that's much manageable when it's broken down in sizes. Some of you may have know who Red Green is. And he said, I once took engineering, but I didn't take all of it. And boy, is that true for model railroading. Okay, so woohoo, our kit arrived. It looks like this, comes in a little box. And it's got stuff in it. So you open it up and look, there's instructions. Who knew? Now, instructions versus my way. Read the instructions prior to starting the kit. You want to just familiar yourself with all the parts. And if you start ahead, if you sort of wanted to get going, or if you, that's fine. But I'm going to tell you, I'm going to change some of the process and some of the suggestions that Randy makes because I have done this in classes before, and I know a few changes to help those who have never built a plaster kit. So choose your peril. Oh, look what we got. We got some paper signs. We got a bunch of bubbly wrap with stuff in it, and a little bag of detail parts, usually a couple doors and some plastic. So the walls are made from plaster. Who knew? So if you sent Downtown Deco an email, you got 2 complete sets of walls. So in all 2 sets are spread out. We just want to work on 1 set. We're going to keep that other set either as for something that you can make a mistake on the first set, or you can build another one almost completely as a redo or just an extra building. Remember, Hydrocal is strong, but when using kits, there can be small and delicate pieces. Use care when handling the parts. And if you have a broken part, you can just glue them together, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You can also send Randy a little email, and he will actually replace them. But usually if you haven't lost any of the little parts, like if it's really gone into, you know, micro parts, then you want to order another one. But if not, you can just glue them up actually. Here's one that I dropped, and you can see the cracks in it up here. And this is after I glued it and painted it. And as far as I'm concerned, it just adds character to the wall. So just glue the pieces back together. I like to use yellow glue. And before you do anything else, just glue it back together, lay it flat, and go from there. So when working with these kits, here's a great tip. Put some old carpet or a couple towels on the floor between you and your workbench, so that when you do drop a wall or two, it lands on something self and necessarily won't break, or at least not break into multiple pieces. So if not, you may be like our friend and want to find a jug. So most pieces that come out, even with a mold, have what's called a draft angle on them. And the reason why they put this draft angle on is so that the parts can be removed out of the mold, whether it be plastic or hydrocal molds or anything. There's a slight angle on them so that the parts can come out. Now, this is very important. Know what edges you're looking at, okay? The first wall you'll see is smooth. There's no detail on it. You'll see on the next one, you'll actually see that there's molded detail into that. Do not sand the detail part off. It's very easy to do, trust me. DPM buildings are exactly the same as this. Do not sand the detail pieces off. You just want to clean up the edges that don't have detail on them. Now, flashes of thin ridges, it's usually squirted out with the plastic, or in this case, the hydrocal squirts out of the mold a little bit, and will create flash along the surfaces. Now, we're going to remove that. Now, one of the things when you square up the main walls and you're doing the bottom is that a lot of people will just take the sandpaper and sort of do it freehand. And what happens is you tend to lift a little bit as you get towards the one end, and you start to round this corner. And that becomes a pain when you go to mate the two walls together, because you've got a rounded edge and now you got a big gap. So here's a little trick that I learned from Miles Hale. Basically, I take a piece of melamine shelving and cut it into a little piece. I take a piece of sandpaper and just use spray adhesive and glue that right down onto that piece. And then I just take a little piece of 1x4 and screw it in. So make sure it's at 90 degrees to the sandpaper. And then by sliding your wall and not lifting it, you just slide it across there, you're not going to get those rounded corners. It's a real easy thing to make if you don't have one. Now, remember, flash removal, not detail. So over here, you can see where some of the flash is. All right. And you want to remove that. You can see up here. Here's some up here. That little piece there is actually detail. That's molded in. So you don't want to take that out. So the easiest way to clean off the flash is to use a chisel blade or in the back of an X-Acto knife. And these little sanding sticks are just perfect for cleaning up these castings. Remember, thin ridges are the injected molded parts, or in this case, the plaster. And I have this in here twice just so you remember not to take off the detail. Again, don't take off the detail. Okay, so once you have all the castings cleaned up, this is a change from the instructions. In Randy's case, he suggests to do it with a flat white spray can, just giving it a light coat. I'm going to suggest you use a clear matte. And I'll tell you why later on. It'll be in the next segment. It won't be in this section, but you'll see why. And it's just a little trick I have found. If you muck it up, we can fix stuff. If not, you're kind of stuck. But if you use the matte finish, you'll find out it works really well. So you just want to give everything a light coat with this. Make sure you do all the edges. And when you have it flat like this and you spray it, you'll see it. Once you have enough is when it will start pooling on the surface. When you first shoot it, that hydrocal will absorb that spray like nothing. So when it just starts to pool on there, it isn't disappearing almost instantly, you know you got enough. Okay, now we're gonna time to open the door on this place. So on the front door, we need to cut out the front door. Reason we do this is because the door has windows in it. So you want to soften the plaster by brushing on a little water. And then we're going to use our 1/8 drill and we're going to drill 4 holes in each corner. Then we're going to take our X-Acto knife, score between the holes, and then you can add more drill holes and make it like Swiss cheese and keep using your blade to score a little bit of the plaster. And then it becomes really easy to remove. Do not force this process because you will break that front wall. So here I have the front wall. I've already used a little bit of water on it, and I've drilled my 1/8 holes in the corner. And now I have this little Dremel drill, and I used it to drill into it, but a little pin vise works great, and you don't have to worry. Again, I put a little drop of water in it with a brush and just smoosh it around a little bit on the door to make it a little softer. And then I make sure I take my X-Acto knife and I go from hole to hole, and I'm scoring this. Now I will actually make an X as well. And then you can take a hole, you can see here in the picture here where I've scored it and across. So then you can take your drill and just drill more holes. Now you got to be a little careful here. Don't see this one here. I've actually gotten too close to the wall. Don't get too close to the wall. It will just break out, and then you've got your door opening. Okay. And be thankful you only have to do the front door. You don't have to do the back door at all. And that's what it should look like. Front door, back door, still solid. Now, let's assemble the walls. I like to use yellow glue, but it's your choice. You can use anything you want. I go out and buy a big gallon of yellow glue, and I go to the little dollar store around the corner and I buy these squirt bottles and I fill them up, and I use this for applying glue. I also have been buying these little, you get 30 of these bottles with these metal pins in it that are nice and clear. And if you thin this down, it'll go through that really easy. You can use white glue for this, but I really prefer the yellow. So now you want to test fit the walls to the front wall, and they go on the inside. They don't go on the side. Okay. They go on the inside, and you want to test the 2 front walls, make sure that it's relatively flush here, and go from there. Once you know that they're good and you know where they're going, you can use some yellow glue and ensure that the wall is square. Now I do something, and I do this all on my DPM buildings too. I put them in about a 1/16 of an inch, and I have this little reveal here. And I do that for scenic purposes. When you weather that and stuff, you'll really see it. Now, a lot of times, if there's another building close to it, you'll never see it. But it's one of my things I do, and I've been really happy with the way it turns out. Okay, so once you've got them, basically, I gotta move this. Once you have the 2 front walls and you got them square, let them dry. And do not glue in the back wall. Okay, you do not want to do anything with the back wall. Just let the 2 walls dry for about an hour or so. Take a nap, you deserve it. You've been working hard. Now, the back wall, most kits, especially plaster kits, are dimensionally not the same as the front kit or front wall, especially if you put that little reveal on it. So when you go to measure this, you're going to find, oh crap, it won't slide in there. So I know the back wall and the front wall, my 2 side walls, will not be square. They'll be splayed. So you want to sand that on both edges until it slips right in between there. Okay, it should be fairly snug, but not that you're going to force it. Okay. Now, after you've got that back wall, you need to be careful here. You're going to dry fit the wall, clamps and squares, and make sure it's nice and square. Now, don't get too excited and just drop in the rear wall. Ask me how I know. When I was building the first one, I did exactly that. I just got so excited and forgot to measure and sand it and make it fit. And what happened is, you can see on this one, see how this wall was splayed out? See how it's on an angle here? See on the second one, it's nice and straight because I did it right. So make sure you sand this to fit in between here. All right. And as I said, repeat slide for the instructor. Okay, so we're going to check our doors for fit. Do not glue the doors in. I'll let you all know when you're supposed to do that. So you want to cut them out. I like to use a sprue cutter, a nice clean sprue cutter. And I want to make sure they fit properly in the back. This little gap, that's just from the mold and stuff. That's not a problem. But you want it to lay square in here. All right. And you're going to use your little sanding stick or whatever to make sure it lays flat. Sometimes you have to open it up. All right. The same thing with the front door. Well, I guess see how this one's a little tight here. It's on a slight angle. I should open that up a little bit more so that that door sits perfectly in there. Okay. And so you have your front door opening, you have your rear door opening, and basically it's assembled. Now, after you let it dry for some time, I'm going to show you how to fix the gaps in the wall. So if you look at my little pointer here, and I'm very proud of my little pointer, you'll see that there's a slight gap in that wall. And you can really see it here, because usually the plaster walls, even though if you sand the back of this wall, you're never going to get it perfectly flat. So you get this gap. How do we fix that? It's actually quite easy. So we're going to fix that gap by using white hydrocal, just like the building is molded in. So we have that little hydrocal in a little cup, and we have some water. And we're going to put some water in here until it becomes like thin pancake consistency. All right. It should almost drip off your stir stick, but not quite. And then you want to take a little brush, and you're going to dip it right into the bottom of the hydrocal, and you're going to just touch it to the side of the wall in your gap. Don't paint it. You want to touch it. And what will happen, it will just flow in there. The dry hydrocal will pull that wet liquid right in there and make it nice and clean. And it will fill in that gap. You can see how nice and that is. There's no gap now compared to on the other side of the brush. Now you can also fix doors if you've got, if you've did like I did on the one where I had that hole a little too close to the edge. So I can do the same thing. I can just fill in a little bit of that hydrocal, and with that method, you just tab it, it'll suck it right in, and just leave it. When it dries, you sand it to where you need it. Now on the other one, on the wall here, because we have detail here, and sometimes you get your brush and the hydrocal fills in some of the detail, you want to just take your X-Acto knife and clean that edge up. Okay. Now, once we've done that, you can see how that's all filled in. We're just going to give it a real quick spray to seal all our corrections. Just give it a real light coat of the clear. So that's the wall assembly done, and let the wall dry, and we'll see you in the next segment, which will be all about painting. Now, I'm hoping that my new specialty camera will be here, and I can actually do that live to show you how to paint the walls. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. All right. So anybody have any questions?
This is not a question, but when I've assembled like York buildings or downtown Deco buildings, and I did the same filling gap that you did, but one thing I did do is tape up the brick edges.
You can do that, sure.
Yeah, and that way you don't lose that detail, and you can then, and then when everything dries, you can just grain the. I think that's probably wrong too, but just brick strip where the bricks are. Yeah,
I'm just careful.
Well, I'm a slob, so I guess I can't say that. At least that's what my wife will tell me.
No, that is a very good trick. I mean, it will speed up your build because you're not going back and fixing stuff. There's no question.
Yep.
Any other tips you have? Anything I didn't?
What was the address to get the kit?
The address to get the kit. Oh, hold on. Please hold while we technically get to you. Okay.
Zoom Master put it in the chat section.
Oh, did he?
Yes.
Righty.
Downtowndeco.com.
Yeah. But make sure you send him an email after you've paid for the kit and tell him you're doing my clinic, because he will send you the extra castings. All those who have gotten it, did you get your extra castings?
Yep.
Good. Yeah, Randy's pretty good.
Yes.
Clark, let me ask you a question. Why do you like the yellow glue rather than the white?
I just find it a little bit more intolerant to sort of the water that we're going to use when we start painting.
Gotcha. Anybody else have any questions for Clark?
Jim, I spent years as a cabinet maker and carpenter and finished carpenter and stuff like this, and the yellow glue was always, it was just a little thicker, it's a little more sturdy, and it definitely makes a stronger joint.
Yeah, and that was the other thing that I really prefer, is that it is much stronger. Now, the other thing that you can do with this that I really didn't show, and I probably should, and it's a very small building, so you have to kind of maybe use a little stir stick or something to get in there, but you can make a bead of glue on the inside, so that you're not just counting on the two mating edges. You can actually make a weld of glue in there. Just remember, don't get too close to the roof, because you want to put your roof on.
Gotcha.
Is there a specific paint we should get for this?
Just a ceramic coat paints that we, you can buy in the stores, and it's pretty easy to find. You can pick whatever poison color you want. Those type of paints, just the cheap Michael's dollar store paints. Now, I do like the Woodland Scenics concrete better than anything else, because it's kind of a greeny gray, but that's me. That's about all you need. And now, in his instructions, I think and I even said it in the pre-clinic, he goes with a ready, or a sort of an orangey brick, but looking at the color of the paper signs, I would tend to go more of a brown or a cinnamon type of color as the main brick, but that'll be up to you guys. You can pick and choose. You got two kits to play with. So
also might mention, if you'll go to the website, newtracksmodeling.com, under the page of the build along, there's a detailed list of all of the tools, the paints, all of that is included on that website. So Clark, thank you so very much. I appreciate it. I'm sorry I got to you late tonight. I hope you have a great birthday party.
Yeah, well, it's not mine, but my brother-in-law and his wife we were supposed to be over there at like 8 o'clock. So anyway, we will talk to you guys later.
That's great. Let me ask you that. Let me make sure I got this right. The tool segment that you mentioned that you could do, I got you scheduled for that the next show on the 31st.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Okay, thanks so much. Have a good birthday.
Okay, good night.
Next, I'd like to turn to Rick and Maureen Hunter, and they're going to talk about their company and the products that they have, the models, as well as the weather. So, Rick, Maureen, welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
Good evening, everybody. Yeah, Maureen is here. See, we get her on another camera. Let's see if I can do this now.
Okay, sure.
My gosh, you're getting better at this.
I'm getting quicker.
There you go. Okay.
Look at that. I can do it in less than 5 seconds now. What we want to go over tonight is some basic stuff that we use all the time for kits. It's probably for the old season modeler, you probably know all this, but we want to make sure you understand exactly the tools and so on that we use and some of the methods. One of the things we want to accomplish tonight is Maureen has got an excellent reputation for putting MBWs on kits. Over the years, she's got to the point where she doesn't lose any. And we're going to show you that little technique a little later tonight. But right now, we want to go through some of the tools. Maureen, you want to take it?
Sure. Well, first off, just when I'm starting to build a kit, just make sure you got a nice flat, hard surface to work on.
What we're talking about there is we have right here, it's a 3/4 inch melamine shelving, and it's nice and straight and tough. What we learned one time is if you ever see us at a show, Maureen is always building one of our kits, and she was building one of our big howl trusses, and we didn't realize that the table had a little whoop-de-doo in it. And of course, the bridge ended up having to be a sway back. And we've learned from there that you have to have a good, solid surface to work on.
Yeah. Then what I usually do is just, of course, read my instructions, but as Clark said, and tape down my drawing, my template drawing on the board, and then put a sheet of wax paper over top. I'm sure you probably already know that, but it's just really, really helpful that you can cut all your wood right on that drawing and not damage the drawing, and you do your gluing right on the drawing as well, and it won't stick to the paper, which is great. Some of the other things that I can't do without is this handy dandy little razor saw. So I always use a fine tooth razor saw to distress all my lumber before I stain it. And I use it to cut my lumber as well.
We over the years, people say, why don't you use a chopper? Well, we never use a chopper because it actually bends and destroys the end cut of it. It compresses it, and that's not the look that you want. So we find that razor saw gives a nice clean cut all the way through.
Mm-hmm. And I think last week or one of the weeks that we've been doing the New Tracks meetup, I showed you how I distress the lumber, and that's what I use. So I would distress all my lumber and then do all my staining and then glue everything together. And the glue that I like to use is Titebond. I really like that. It's really nice and tacky and doesn't set up too quickly, so you've got plenty of time to work with it. It's a great glue. I also have tried LePage's wood glue and Elmer's, and I like it as well, but I seem to come back to Titebond all the time.
What we look for in a glue is that it gets a lot of the glues out there are an hour later, they're still not set up, where we find, you'll see on the label there, it does say short clamp time, which is good. That's what we look for. We just happen to be using Titebond. We've used a lot of them before, but we always use the yellow glue, the Carpenter glue. It is stronger. We've used this Carpenter glue for many, many years, and sometimes that shows when our models actually hit the floor. We actually have the glue stay, the joint stays together, and it's the wood that breaks.
And Clark had showed you the little bottle that he uses. I use the same thing. It's great. I picked this one up on Amazon. They sell the bottles in quite a big package of bottles, and they give you different gauge tips, so you can pick which one that works for you best. Another tool that I really can't do without is this Ultimation sander. And you've seen Al Collins on previous track meetups and has demonstrated the use of this sander, and it's fantastic. I tell you, it really has saved a lot of my projects. It's just a great sander. You get all your joints are just perfect, and saves you a lot of time.
He doesn't give us a commission on advertising this, okay? We just like to use it.
And I think what I'm going to show you now is just how I put these little NBWs in nut bolt washer castings. I don't know if I can live up to what Rick said, but I'll show you the process that I follow. And I've just got a tie string assembly here that I'm going to just demonstrate how I do that. Usually we put in the NBWs on every fourth tie on the tie guard. So I just use a drill bit that's the same size as the NBW. And I'll go to the fourth tie and just drill a little hole, pilot a hole. Rick likes to use a push pin, but I prefer the little drill. I'll put a couple in here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So just pilot a good size hole for yourself.
While she's doing that, you can see what our drawings actually look like. I'm in AutoCAD. I have been for many, many years, and all our drawings are actually templates that you would draw, build it right on the drawing with the wax paper. But our drawings are very accurate, and none of them are photocopied. They are all originals off the printer or off the plotter, whatever machine we're using. But there's reasons for doing that. You don't want a drawing to end up being 98% or 102%. It's got to be right on.
So I've got my little sprue of NBWs. These are O-scale, so I'm kind of cheating. They're nice and big. You can see them pretty good, I think. Always do it on a white background, and if you do it right on your drawing, over top of your wax paper, you won't destroy the drawing. So these are a Tishy product, and they're great because they're a great color. They're sort of that rusty brown color already. Get yourself a really sharp X-Acto knife. And what I used to do is keep a good head on that NBW and just slice it off just, before the end of the sprue. What I used to do was cut it straight across. And I found out a couple of weeks ago, a gentleman had suggested that cut it on an angle, cut it off on an angle, and it'll have a little bit of a point there and it'll go into the hole even easier. So what I do is just hold on to your sprue with your left hand or right, whatever hand you are, and take your pointer finger, put it over top of that, the end of the X-Acto knife, and cut off that first little NBW on an angle.
Your finger is actually going to hold it on so it won't go flying.
So you
and don't cut the whole spew at one time, just 1 or 2 or 3 at a time.
Yeah. So you can see I've got a couple here. And on the white background, you can really pick that up. Now, the other thing that really, really is helpful is if you've got a good tweezers. These are at a 90-degree angle, and they're very, very pointy, very sharp. They meet together at the end, which is really important because you can grab that little NBW just under the head, and it's not going to shoot out anywhere. Those the ends of the tweezer are meeting just perfectly. So just before I do that, though, I have to give myself a little pot of glue. So just a little pot of glue on your wax paper. Take that NBW with the tweezers just under the head and grab it. And then pop that tail into the glue and then go for the hole. And that little angle that you cut off should make it go in quite nicely. And it did. I don't know if you can see that, but I'll do another one here. So just grab it under the head with those sharp tweezers.
I watched this one go flying.
Yeah. Pop the tail into the glue and then head for that hole. Okay. And pop it in. I just use the tweezer to take off any glue that might be along the edges.
I usually say once you've done 10 of them, you're an expert.
Yeah.
Marine's probably up about 10,000 of them.
So that works really, really well. If you're an N scaler, or if you're an HO or whatever, and you just can't get it, you just can't get it. I found this pen at Michael's. It comes in a package of different colors. Unfortunately, can't just buy this pen. It's made by Kuretake, and you find it in the scrapbooking section. It's called Zig Memory System, and it is pure brown. That's the color of it, 05 pure brown, and it is great. It's a really rust-colored pen, and you can just take that. It's very fine tip, and it doesn't bleed. And you can just take it and dot for your NBW, and it works great.
So that's how you do an N scale NBW.
Yeah. So once I've got the NBWs in, usually what I'll do, they look great though. They're nice rust colored. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but usually what I'll do is then take our creosote black, use it as a wash, and just take my cheap dollar store brush, flat brush, and just take it and run it across that tie guard and across the NBWs. And what it does, it's probably pretty hard for you to see it here, but it highlights the little ring that's on that nut bolt washer casting.
So what it does, it's like soldering. It rings around whatever it's touching. So you can actually see that it's a hex head nut on a round washer.
Yeah, I think that's it in a nutshell. Anybody have any questions?
I think that's fantastic modeling, Marie. I really do. That's fantastic.
Yeah, just don't use that extra nut bolt and washer that you cut off.
You want us to send it to you?
Yeah.
Sure.
There it is.
Maureen, those are the larger nut bolt washer castings. How about the little ones? Do you have any suggestions for using those little ones that were in that King Post bridge that I bought?
Yeah, I just do the same thing, Jerry. Just make sure you've got a great pair of tweezers. That is a huge help. As you know, just make sure those points meet perfectly, and just do the same process. Even for the little ones, that's what I do. I just pick them up under the head, just like that, and pop them in the glue. And I just shot that one across, but just pop that tail in the glue and pop it in the hole. I can't, I can't give you any other tip other than that. Try cutting it off at an angle too on that sprue. Just take it and cut it on an angle. Hold your finger over top of it, and having that little point on the end makes it a little bit easier to get it in the hole.
When we first started this, we used a Dremel drill. Wow. It's completely uncontrollable. This way you can target it and just take your time at putting the hole in and straight up and down.
Yeah.
One other question for you, and this is for the group as well who builds laser kits. Has anyone ever used that Fowler laser kit glue?
No, I haven't.
I have not.
You gotta remember the laser cuts it's a different type of wood, a laminate type of wood, and it's not basswood, okay? So I don't know, like we're not laser cut people, so we can't answer that effectively, but Why not? Like it probably.
Well, Rick, Maureen, thank you so much. I really do appreciate you being here this evening. Look forward to seeing you next time.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention about our build along coming up. The registrations are coming in. This is good. You can help me on this with the dates, Jim.
Yep.
It starts on May 22nd, and it's going to be
Yep.
8 sessions of a half-hour long.
Right.
And we want all the orders for the kits to be in by May the 8th, so we can get them to you in plenty of time. And there's been a little bit of confusion about, we are going to build the S scale version because it's easier to see, it's bigger. But some of the guys are, can I build another scale? Well, yeah, we can build it whatever you want, N scale, HO, S, O, or any of the narrow gauges. And just when you give us the order, we'll talk to you about it. That's why we're controlling this, is that we need what colors you want and what scale.
Because they also get two different bottles of your weathering fluid with the model, right, Rick?
Yeah, there's 2 colors. We call it a base color and a highlight color. The base color, depending on if you like grays or browns, but it's usually a lighter color, like our driftwood or Cordovan brown or light gray or blue gray. And then we always suggest using a crisp black at the end, highlight color, just like Maureen did across the MBWs there. That adds the grease and oil and crap on the ties and what's underneath the locomotives, and also highlights all the little MBWs that are on it.
If you have those colors already, some of those colors already, you just pick another 2 colors.
You have 2 colors that you want. Yeah.
Rick, is there a special spot on your page on, or can you put out the website address?
Well, it's pretty easy. It's www.hunterline.com.
Okay.
Email to rick@hunterline.com, and don't go online, because our store is not set up to take discounts, and the prices on there are at a discounted price. So just email me what you want, and then we'll converse back and forth and get all the details.
Okay.
And also, again, all of this information is on our website at newtracksmodeling.com under the build along section. What we've done is listed each one of the different build alongs. Hunterline has all of the information about tools, about the model, about the different scales that it's available in, and the ordering directions and everything. So if you have any questions, you can look at that information. And then Rick has his email address, his telephone number, and his way to contact him on that website.
And that, another point is that you don't have to be an accomplished modeler to do this. Okay, we do this what we call a make and take at conventions all the time, and the majority of the people are beginners to middle. But then we get the seasoned ones on there, and they learn a few things too. So it doesn't matter what your capability is, we can get you through it.
A question from Al. He wants to know how many sessions to build a snow shed.
How many parts are in it, Al? So let's say 10 parts a day. I think Al said there was 4,000 parts to that kit. But you can use his sander to do it.
Yeah.
On COVID time, you could do 2.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, thanks so much, guys. I really do appreciate it.
836 count. Well, we didn't hear you on that one. Can you say that again?
That was Al, wasn't it?
I do not know.
Anyways, okay, that's it for us tonight, guys. Stay safe, okay?
You too. Thank you so very much.
Can you
Thank you.
unshare the screen?
I'm sure.
Stop share. Okay, there we go.
Put your mic on.
Okay, next I'd like to go to Greg Cassidy for his what's new of the modeling world and what's available out there for us. Greg, welcome.
All right, let me get back into my share. All right, you can hear me and I hope see me. Thank you,
Yes.
Jim. I want to say good evening to everyone. I'm Greg Cassidy. Like to welcome you to What's New, a monthly segment where manufacturers can spotlight their new products that are in development or being released. I'm always looking for new items and suggestions are always welcome. First, we'll have a few items from Railscale Models. Railscale Models is releasing a new line of sidewalks and lumber loads in multiple scales. You can add a unique detail to your model scene using these scale sidewalk packs. The laser cut sidewalks will come in HO scale 4-foot, 6-foot, 8-foot widths, and in 48 and 84-foot lengths. The top pack here includes 3 48-foot lengths of linear sidewalk at 4-foot width, laser scribed and cut into 1/16 inch basswood. The other pack shown includes 2 84-foot lengths of linear sidewalk at 8-foot width. Sidewalks include expansion joint details and curb details. Staggered joints allow extended lengths to merge seamlessly. You can cut them to a desired length for your model scene. Also available are HO scale sidewalk square corners and end caps. This pack includes 90-degree square outside corners and end caps for a 4-foot wide sidewalk set. And the other pack includes 90-degree rounded outside corners and end caps. There are also lightly aged sidewalk packs. This pack includes 3 lightly aged 48-foot lengths of linear sidewalk at 4-foot width. Lightly aged includes cracks, crevices, and slight deterioration in locations throughout the sidewalk. There are also matching end caps that are lightly weathered. This pack includes 90-degree rounded outside corners and end caps for the 6-foot wide sidewalk set. Laser scribed and cut into 1/16 inch basswood. They include expansion joint details and curb details. And the sidewalks will soon be joined by offerings in N scale, S scale, and O scale. Another new product from Railscale is laser cut stacked lumber. This item represents a stack of rough cut lumber. Typically, rough cut lumber comes from a sawmill and is ready to be dried in a kiln. Pieces of lumber have yet to be cut to size or graded, so you'll see a stack of similar thickness but variable widths and lengths. In HO scale, one kit includes 2 sheets approximately 6.5 inches by 3.5 inches on 1/32 inch basswood, simulating approximately 3-inch wide lumber at roughly 10-foot lengths. Another pack in O scale is approximately 14 inches by 6 inches on 1/16 inch basswood, simulating about 3 inches wide lumber at 12-foot lengths. These include enough material to create 2 4-foot tall lumber stacks. The modeler may create 3 to 6 shorter stacks with materials included. Each layer is a unique configuration and several layers include pre-cut lines in which a center section may be removed to create a hollow center to allow additional weight to be added so the stack can be used as a freight car load on a flat car or gondola. The kit includes scaled 4 inch by 4 inch strip wood to use as stack risers and banding around the sides. Also, more is to follow in the lumber stacks. They will have a finished lumber stack available as well. You can find all the variations available of both sidewalks and lumber stacks at Railscale Models. Their website is www.rail-scale-models.com, or you can email Stephen at railscalemodels@yahoo.com. Next up is Motrac Models. Motrac Models proudly announces a new structure kit in HO and N scale. the Wolfboro Freight House. Groundbreaking for the Wolfboro Railroad took place in November of 1871. The 12-mile stretch between Wolfboro Junction and Wolfboro was completed in the summer of 1872. It became the most unique short line in New Hampshire. In 1961, the Boston and Maine Railroad sold the freight house to Parsons Furniture. Then they sold the freight house in 1966 to the present owner, Wolfboro Oil Company. The HO scale laser cut kit comes with the following items: laser cut walls, roof pieces, and freight doors, laser cut diamond shingles, board by board loading docks, tissue plastic windows, resin detail parts, and first time colored templates. The HO scale pilot model was built by Brian and Jill of Bollinger Edgerly Scale Trains. It has easy to follow instructions and is made in the USA. The dimensions are 13.5 inches by 4.5 inches, and the retail price is $100. The N scale kit comes with the following items: laser cut walls, roof pieces, and freight doors, laser cut diamond shingles, board by board loading docks, tissue plastic windows, detail parts, and first time colored templates. The dimensions of the N scale are 5 3/4 inches by 2.5 inches, and the retail price is $85. And this just came in from Jeff today. Northeastern scale lumber HO and O scale metal roofing is not in production right now due to the machine being broken, and they don't know when the machine will be up and running again. Motrac's Applewood General Store uses Northeastern scale lumber metal roofing. They will be making a change to the kit to have 3-tab shingles on all their roofs from now on. Right now, they have only 2 kits left in stock with the metal roofing on the main building. So if anyone wants this kit with the metal roof, they need to order it right away. And as a bonus, he will take $20 off the price. You can contact them at www.motracmodelsusa.com or email Jeff at info@motracmodelsusa.com. Last up is Monster Model Works. Jimmy Simmons at Monster Model Works has a few new items coming out. This is the HO scale clerestory kit. This full-length concrete clerestory is a great addition to their brick freight house or your own structure. The dimensions are 11 inches by 1 1/4 inches by 0.6 inches, and the price is $19.99. It will install on any flat roof. Simple instructions are included. The kit includes acrylic base, peel and stick concrete sheets with window openings, peel and stick window frames, laser cut roof, and laser cut peel and stick tar paper. This is the O-scale Brick Engineers Tool Shed. This kit is based on the Milwaukee Roads Engineers Tool Shed that was restored by the Sioux City Railroad Museum in Iowa. Perfect for any yard scene. It's small and easy to build. The dimensions are 3 1/4 inches by 6.4 inches by 3.5 inches, and the price is $59.99. The kit includes 3D laser engraved aged American brick, laser engraved brick corners, laser engraved terracotta coping, peel and stick laser cut windows and glazing, and laser cut wood door. Here is the Placerville Garage Kit. It comes in HO scale for $79.99 and in S scale for $119.99. The inspiration for this kit comes from a scratch-built version by Steve Harris. He had help from Michael Blazik and Jake Johnson. Jimmy says he appreciates all their input. Steve has an article about his scratch-built version in the Narrow Gauge Gazette. This kit is based on the historic Placerville, Colorado garage, located right behind the Placerville station. The location became known as Placerville after the Rio Grande Southern Railroad constructed a depot with several passing sidings west of the original settlement. Even though this kit was based on a Western structure, just change the color of the stone and this structure could fit anywhere. Check out the last 2 pictures. They're colored to look more like East Coast or Midwest. The dimensions of the HO kit are 6.75 by 8.25 by 3.3, and the S scale kit are 8.7 by 10.4 by 4.4 inches. They both feature 3D laser engraved block stone corners, 3D engraved stone corners, 3D printed rooftop exhaust pipes, old brick decorative chimney, laser cut doors and windows with glazing, peel and stick tar paper roofing, sign and simple weathering tips. And last, we have the saloon kit. This comes in HO scale for $69.99 and S scale for $89.99. In June 1867, the Carissa lode was discovered near South Pass City, Wyoming by a party of Mormons. It was the richest strike up in that date in that area. In 1868, a general store was built on Main Street, and in 1890, the store was converted into the Carissa Saloon. The saloon has been in South Pass City, Wyoming for over 120 years. This kit could also be used for any type of business, such as a mercantile. Kit concept and drawings are by Jake Johnson. The dimensions for the HO kit are 4 3/4 by 3 1/8 by 2 3/4 inches, and the S scale kit are 6 3/4 inches by 4 1/8 inch by 3 1/2 inches. They include 3D engraved split loss siding, engraved quarried stone foundation, storefront assembly with glazing, laser cut positionable window with glazing, laser cut door, detailed wood stairs, peel and stick cedar shake roofing, rooftop smoke pipe, saloon sign stencil, scribed wood flooring throughout, and quick tab and slot construction. You can view these at www.lakespurlaserart.com/monster-modelworks-products or email Monster Modelworks at jimmy@monstermodelworks.com. And I'll be putting all of those web addresses and email addresses in the chat window after this. So that's what's new for this month. I'm always looking for new products to spotlight. If you or someone you know has a new release, contact me at gcassidy2@verizon.net. Thank you for watching.
Greg, thank you so very much. I appreciate it. A lot of great models coming out. I have one other thing I'd like to make a comment to Greg about. Greg and Chris have their My Build special section next show for the modelers that built along the model with Greg of the Conowingo company's product. And Chris is offering a raffle for the modelers that show their kit and how they built it and talk about it a little bit. And if you'll send Chris an email, he'll make sure that you get on the show, and everybody that is on the show will be eligible to be entered in his raffle, which then he's awarding the person whose name is drawn from the raffle another free kit from his company. So I hope that you'll all attend that. And Greg, I want to thank you again for all your help in being the guinea pig for all of these build-alongs. I really do appreciate that.
It was my pleasure.
Also, I'd like for you to take a minute, if you can, Greg, and show us the type of structure you're building. That is the structure that Bob Farquhar is going to do in his build-along of the Blair Line kit. What Greg is doing, I find fascinating because it shows you don't necessarily have to just open a box of a kit and build it exactly as the photo is. You can get as creative in your own right as you want to with these kits and build it to suit whatever space or whatever interest you may have. So Greg, appreciate it if you could show your modeling.
I'm going to make this real quick. I've just got 4 photos that I'll show. I'm not done with it, but I wanted to get a jump start on Bob's build along. So all I did outside of what the kit calls for was some creative painting and staining on the walls. And I decided to make the kit as possibly a rundown building. Some of the signs are rusting and the business has closed up. They ran on hard times. And in fact, somebody's even broken into the back door of the storeroom. It's all just modeling tips that I've shown and that others are going to show in future build-alongs. And it's all just using your imagination and what you want to come up with. And you don't always have to follow the instructions. So that's it, Jim.
Well, Greg, thanks so very much for doing that. I'm really looking forward to Bob's time in building the Blair Line kit. I know a lot of people are going to follow along with him doing that. And I really do appreciate the creativity that you've shown in the way that you're planning to build it. So next, I'd like to turn to Fred Cosgrove. Fred and I have known each other for years. I first met Craig in Detroit, Michigan, when I was a member of the Detroit United Railway Club up there. Craig is a longtime trolley modeler, and he's agreed to start a series with us once a month on trolley modeling. So Fred, thank you so much for doing this. Welcome. Looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Let's see, get in there. This is an introduction to trolley modeling, trolleys, and myself.
Are you sharing screen, Fred?
Okay, where are we?
Ed, can you help Fred maybe figure this out?
Yeah, are you have the program up and running, the slideshow?
Yes.
You have to enable slide sharing.
He
Yeah,
has that.
I know that. The trouble is I get the program, then I can't find the screen sharing. Okay, let's try that.
Ed, you have a copy of it, right? There you go.
No, there we go.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. This is an introduction to trolley modeling, trolleys and traction equipment, and myself. Of course, trolleys are about as different from the steam and diesel railroads as narrow gauge railroads are. Nice thing about trolleys, they take up less space for turning around than a regular railroad does. And of course, a trolley operation can be just one piece of equipment, a passenger car or a freight car, or it can be a whole train. And of course, like steam and diesel railroads, it can run passenger, freight, and special trains. So, thing about trolleys are, they usually operate in the city, a little slower than that. Where interurbans is almost like a Greyhound bus. They usually run from city to city and usually out in the country in the open area. So they're a much faster source of transportation. This is an 1.5" scale car. This is G scale, actually 1/24 scale. O scale. HO cars. And we even deal in N scale.
Hey.
So they come in all different sizes. Myself, how did I become a traction nut? Well, back when I was real small, and this is talking like 5 and 6 years old, my grandma used to take me downtown Detroit. Unfortunately, my grandparents never owned a car. Even though my grandfather worked at Plymouth Motors, he was a foreman of the motor division, but he got a ride to work from somebody else who worked there. So if we wanted to go somewhere, we had to walk a couple blocks down to the main drag and catch the old Martin bus, either to Roy Oak or to 6 Mile and Woodward or McNichols. Of course, we get a 6 Mile and Woodward, we can catch a streetcar. To me, that was fantastic. I loved them. Unfortunately, soon after, in April of '56, Detroit got rid of the streetcars. Well, that really was lousy as far as I was concerned. So we had to take buses after that. Of course, the steam trains were still around. I loved the steam trains. Well, a few years later, wouldn't you know, they were gone. So railroading, as far as I was concerned, was over with. One time, my grandma came up with this idea of taking the train to downtown Detroit. I said, that'd be terrific, because we never rode the train before. So we ended up getting a ride from the neighbor over to the Ferndale Grand Trunk Western Railroad Station, which by this time was just the railroad police stop. And nobody was there. Nobody was around the station, so we didn't know if the train was going to come or not, because we didn't have a schedule. Well, lo and behold, train showed up with the big northern engine on it. The earth moved when that engine went by. So we ended up taking the train down to the Grand Trunk Western's Brush Street station. Well, at that point in time, my grandma says, well, what do you want to do now? I says, well, let's go a Boblo. Well, she counted her money and she says, well, I got enough money to go, but you can't ride any of the rides. I says, that's fine. The boat ride is great. So we walked over a few blocks for the Woodward and caught the boat. Ended up going Pablo Island, had lunch there. She counted her change again. Oh, gee, I got enough money and we can ride the train. So we rode the train and we got back just in time for the next boat to sail back to Detroit. Great. And of course, we caught the streetcar where we got off, went over to the local donut shop and had a Coke and a donut, waiting for the Martin Line bus. Luckily, this time of the day, they were running their new buses. That took us back home. Okay, that was pretty exciting. That was great. But like I said, we lost the streetcars, we lost the trains. So next thing I know, I see in the paper, this new group, Michigan Transit Museum, is moving a couple of the historic streetcars that were left in Detroit. Well, didn't think much about it. Of course, I was looking for some others. I said, well, I could get into model railroading. Well, went to the local hobby shop, and lo and behold, was a flyer posted wanting new members. So I jotted down the number, called it, got invited, got over to where they were meeting, and here one of the guys is laying girder rail. A girder rail? What's this? Turns out a couple of the guys were into streetcars, and it turns out they were members of the Michigan Transit Museum. So they ended up taking me down there one day. I got to see the equipment, which was pretty doggone neat. So I'm pretty enthusiastic. So we played around with the cars on the weekends. And one weekend they said, well, we're going to go to Chicago. Would you be interested? Chicago? Well, I never been any place besides Detroit. So got the okay to go. And we went there, pulled up Michigan City shops. And I'm thinking diesel train, because that's all I see anymore is diesel pulling trains for passenger. And lo and behold, around the building comes a little Joe or 800 series locomotive. Wow, is that what's going to pull our train? No. That's, oh, gee. So I'm thinking of diesel again. Well, a few moments later, a single car comes from the yard with the pantograph up. And we ended up getting on, and it turns out person was with knew the motorman. So he allowed us to ride in the baggage section with the doors open. And it turns out we're doing 60 miles an hour in a 1924 car. I was amazed. So we rode all the way to South Bend. Then we turned around, went back to Michigan City shops, hooked up to a couple more cars and went to Chicago, standing up all the way. When we came back, we stood back, and I haven't been right since. I got electrified. Of course, South Shore, I love, because it has the street running, it has these unique stations. What couldn't you love? Had Gauntlet Bridge, was out in the country, was in the city. My goodness, it covered it all. Unfortunately, they closed up the Michigan City station, put in a pregnant bus stop. The orange cars are gone, but the new cars are still there. So it still is pretty exciting to ride the South Shore. Well, we're going to continue on with the series, learning about various streetcars and trolleys. This is the latest car for Detroit. And this is the biggest car in North America. This is up in Toronto, one of their 5-car articulated units that they're running up there. We're also going to check out the interurbans. And the freight and work equipment. This is a freight motor. And there's a converted freight car in the back. This is a snow sweeper. This is a line car. And a steeple cab. So that's just some of the various equipment you may find at a interurban or a trolley place. Plus, for those of you who are scared of the overhead wire, which is really nothing to be scared about, we're going to talk about systems that use the third rail, like the Chicago, Aurora, and Elgin. The Norristown line that used the famous bullet cars, and it's still in service today. Of course, the North Shore line and Chicago Transit. You definitely can see the third rail here. So this is basically, until next month, the end. Thank you. Any questions? Any answers?
Fred, I think you did a great job. think you did a great job for an introduction.
Pardon?
And thank you so very much. I appreciate it. Look forward to you next month.
Thank you. Hopefully, when I get back up to Michigan, I'll have more source of materials and cars to access for the program.
Well, that's great. We'll look forward to it. Thanks again. Next, I want to turn to Dave Silvernail for his scenic elements. This is a first for Dave. I can't thank him enough for agreeing to do this. I've been looking for somebody for some time to talk about scenery with us, and I think you're really going to enjoy the series with Dave. Dave, thanks so much. I'll turn it over to you, sir.
All right, let's hit the shared screen and go from there. All right. This is Scenic Elements presented by me, Dave Silvernail. First thing we're going to talk about is basically scenery planning. As much as track planning, scenery needs to be involved. A simple list of scenic elements you want to lay out's a good start. Bridges, water, mountains, structures all have to be worked into the plan. So don't fill the whole space with track work. You won't have any room for anything. If you have an idea of what you want, that's all you need to get started. And for those of us who can't draw an illustration to save our lives, there's a basic tool that helps, and it's a camera. Whether it's a DSLR, a point and shoot, cell phone, or tablet, it all works. You find a scene you'd like to model, take pictures. It'll not only help with the layout, but it'll help with the color of the scene. One last thing, while our eyes will pass over what is not on the scene, the camera sees it all. You have to learn to look at pictures for what is missing attitude. That alone will help improve your modeling skills. So what I got here, this is a module that I have built. It's 10 foot long, 30 inches wide, and there's a scene on both sides. The scene on this side, which is usually behind me during the Zoom meetings, is a Colorado scene. I've got super Colorado rockwork. I put a snowshed in. You can't see the tunnel in there. And I have a scene kind of off of the Durango and Silverton, where the track work goes by and the rockwork keeps going downward. The second side is Feather River Canyon scene. There's two tunnels right next to each other, up next to a lake up in the Feather River Canyon. And this is a very simple scene to do. The whole thing is, I got a basic structure under this module, and it's framed in with, it's not styrofoam, but it's a foam that the refrigeration industry uses, which is not flammable. Then I use the Bragdon molds and the Bragdon resin, what they call his, I can't remember his scenery techniques, and this is what I've got. From here, I'm showing a couple other modules from a friend of mine. He's an excellent scratch builder, but had no clue what to do as far as building a mountain. So I ended up helping him and teaching him how to do it. Here, from his stamp mill, it comes down to an abandoned mine, a little bit of a creek coming down. Over to the second module, and he's got a scratch built, mine right here. This was all done with the Bragdon molds, and the way I color them is with an airbrush. This is something I'll get into in about the 6th installment. I'll go, I have other things to get to here beforehand, and rock molds will be probably almost June before I get to it. Here I am helping a friend with building his new ON30 layout. This is a drawing he has. We first walked in, he put the first iteration of the drawing up, and first thing we told him is his aisles weren't big enough. So we had to go back and redraw the whole thing and start over again. But fortunately, he had a bare room at the time. So here we have the start of it. Actually, it's about 3 months in. I think we started in the first part of November, and this was yesterday. We had 6 of us down here working on it. Part of his layout. Here's another section. This is actually 2 finished modules that he's placed up there, and we're going to build them into the layout. Here's one of the sections he's doing. Down on the bottom is the main line. And we've got an upper section for a mine trackage. What he's using is material they put across, outdoor patios for kind of a sunscreen filter. And we're covering it using, sheetrock coating. This is the powdered sheetrock topping. Mix it up, mix some color into it, spread it on there, and that's the base for scenery. Here's what happens when all of a sudden the scene has to kind of work its way over the track. We now have a tunnel going in. Bad part is we got to go back and put the track in. Here's a section where a bridge is being designed to go in. Right now we're working on getting the base for the bents. We're going to go back and redo all this river through here. Right now it's too deep. We're going to bring it up a bit. The last picture is where we've got some rock molds put on here testing, so we know how to color them and everything. And here is kind of the focus for today. It's a picture of what's to come, or actually it's off of another layout, but giving him an idea of what to do for the bridge right there. Okay, the next 3 slides I put in to help you get an idea how to color certain things. These 3 slides are of the Donner Summit area in California. This is where the Transcontinental Railroad comes through. And it basically is to give me an idea how to color the granite rocks and look at the granite rocks in shadows and all the foliage. This is a section looking up at the actual Donner Summit itself. You can see all the rock work in here and all the colors. And this is just a shot out through the forest itself, so I can pick up the idea of the colors of any of the foliage that has to go in there and the dirt color. The second side, the next 14 images are what I took of Colorado. I started building this module before I went to Colorado, about 2 years beforehand. It had been nice to know the colors I was going to run into. I had half of an idea and it came out fairly well, but could stand improvement. So this is leaving Durango. And the basic colors of almost like the Southwest, where you've got the real reddish soil and some of the other bleached out rock work. Here I was riding the Durango and Silverton. This is along the canyon, and what I didn't expect is a standard granite color over on the other side of the canyon. But right here next to the tracks, it's all the rock work that's very heavy with iron ore. That's what the red color is. This is that little section that I put on my module, the rock work extending down from the tracks. more of the scenery along the north slope, which has a lot of the reddish browns to it. But then again, I keep running into all this granite work. And it's just more to get an idea of the coloration of the rocks. Here again, something I didn't expect. So now I'll be able to go back and recolor my Colorado side, make it a little bit more accurate. So this whole thing here is all about what a camera can do for you. We can get in, I will start later getting the ideas of what ground cover, go into water, go into trees, go into lots of other things. Like I said, some things I didn't expect. So that's basically what my talk is about today. And a nice little quick water feature that showed up right in the middle of nowhere. So, starting to plan the scenery, it's good to have an idea of what you want. You may not know exactly where they're going to end up, but what you'll find out is your plan will evolve in unexpected ways. Best thing to do is be adaptable. Start with your basic track plan and possible operating scheme. Plug in those elements you want. Don't be afraid to change, as long as the change seems reasonable. One last item to be aware of is your lighting. Lighting is a whole subject unto itself, so just remember to model under the lights you intend to use. The next segment's going to be in 2 weeks, and it'll be on ground covers. So that's it for today.
Thanks, Dave.
Any questions?
Dave, what were these molds that you were talking about?
They're latex rubber molds. Bragdon Enterprises has
Bragdon,
a big
okay.
line of molds. He is actually a local to me. He's about 60 miles away.
Thank you.
Yeah, they tend to come to a lot of the shows out in the West. So and does pretty amazing. If you want, go online and see some very interesting videos about how he does his rock facings.
I've got some of his rusting powders. I didn't know he made molds, but I'm gonna look at those.
Yeah, he was doing the molds and his geodesic foam for 15, 20 years.
So
powders is actually something in the last 10 years.
So when he comes to
what you may not know about his powders, he has an adhesive in them, and the harder you rub, the better they stick.
He's at the Big E quite a bit.
Yeah, he comes to the Just Train show that Dave showed. I think some of those pictures were from there, and he probably has what, Dave, 75 molds, different molds.
More than that,
More
his
than that.
numbering system somewhere into the 130s or 150s.
Pretty amazing.
Oh yes.
Email address,
Hmm?
website or email address?
For what, Bragdon?
Yeah.
It's bragdonent.com. I'll put it in the chat.
Already there.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Now with the rock molds, are there difference between the Rocky Mountains and Appalachia?
Your rocks are about the only difference is the coloration. Probably the Rocky Mountain ones are more jagged, more rough. And he doesn't have that many of the smoother rock molds, but really it's the color. As long as you match the colors, the rocks will take care of themselves. And it's whether you want to do big, huge rock outcroppings or just small rock faces. I mean, you can take their huge mold and you just make a small casting on it. It doesn't have to be all, the whole mold. I've got some molds that are 2 foot by 3 foot. They take a little bit to put together, but it takes me about 30, 40 minutes to prep it and put in the resin, and the resin starts to hard up, and you back it with a expanding foam. And usually at about 30 minutes after you put the foam in, I usually take plastic sheeting, cover the mold after it's all put in. And as soon as I can get the plastic sheeting to come off of the expanding resin, it's all ready to come out. I think sometime about June, I'll be doing that particular segment.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I got most of the mountains that I have, I'm doing the northeast, so they're a little bit more covered with trees than rocks.
That's the easy part. You just, after you get the rocks in there, you just throw in some more glue and put in your whatever you got for bushes and trees.
Yep.
Okay, thanks so very much. I appreciate it and look forward to the next time.
Hey, you're welcome, Jim.
Well, listen, that's it for this evening. I know it's been a little longer than normal. I appreciate everybody's attention and the presenters going with us for this long. I do want to mention again the Build Along series that we've started. Greg and Chris have completed theirs, and the people that worked with them and have built along with Greg during the time will be able to show their progress and their model with the My Build that we're having next session on Wednesday evening, the 31st of March. And I hope that you will attend that, and I hope everybody will show what their building came out to be. Clark Cooning started tonight with his downtown deco. Bob Farquhar with the Blair Line structure is starting April the 17th. Gaylord Gill and Randy Bosner are building the Bar Mills 1 kit. You saw Phil Edholm's model that he's building using that kit last time. And that also starts on the 17th of April. Rick and Maureen Hunter are going to build their King Truss 30-foot bridge starting May the 22nd. And you saw what Rick and Maureen can do in a short segment this evening. And then this fall, Bill Davis is going to build one of Steve Milley's rail scale models. But I don't have the exact model and I don't have a start date for that, but it'll be this fall. All of this information about the build-alongs in great detail is shown on our website in the My Build or the Build-Along section of our website. And I encourage you to go. I encourage you to buy the kit from the manufacturers. And I guarantee you that you'll learn something in the build-along with these fantastic modelers that are doing this with us. Our next Zoom New Tracks meetup is Wednesday, March 31st. Featured modeler is Martin Breckford, MMR, who is the editor of O-Scale Trains magazine. And he's just an exceptional modeler, both from kits and scratch building. He's amazing. Clark Cooning is going to do a short segment on modeling tools. And then Greg and Chris are going to do the My Build section just for those modelers that built along with Greg during the Conowingo Models build kit. So I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Sorry this show ran a little long tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. Thank you so